welcome. So real estate, there's a lot of facets to real estate. And one of the questions that I get often is, man, I have this rental property. I'd love to cash out, but I don't want to pay the tax bill. And that's a real concern, right? You own a property for a very long time. There are going to be tax implications potentially for that. So, and some of those might be a lot bigger than it might be worth to get that sold. So today, joined with Kacey Neer, who is with a 1031 exchange intermediary, I guess is the best way to phrase that. So, Kacey, why don't you, before we dive really into the content, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of where you're from and what you do today?
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Kacey, and I am a native of Denver, Colorado. Prior to being in the title and real estate industry, I worked in banking for 8 years. I've been with Land Title Guarantee for 7.5, almost 8 years now. I started off in the escrow department as the wire coordinator. And then a couple of years ago, I transitioned roles into the 1031 exchange coordinator. So now I run that department as well as lead the escrow funds department.
Okay. So for some of us that may not be in the real estate realm, so tell us a little bit more about kind of what that looks like for you on a day-to-day basis. Who are you chatting with? And
yeah, definitely. So most of the clientele I speak with are realtors like yourself, who have clients that either have questions about the 1031 tax deferred exchange program, or the clients themselves. I love to connect directly with clients, just to kind of figure out what their background is, how they've been using the property, and then of course what their, near and future goals are going to be to make sure that everything's the best fit for them.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? And as we're live here on Facebook, for those that are watching, if you have specific questions that you'd like Kacey to address, type them into the chat box and we'll get those answered. So a Denver native, right? That's yeah. You, that's me. There's seems to be a small minority of us that are
for sure.
So I own a rental property. And it's time to sell it, right? But if I sell it, the government's going to want a big chunk of that. Now,
right.
In Colorado, our values have gone up so high, that maybe it makes sense to buy another rental property somewhere else. Maybe my dollar could go further. Maybe it's down Pueblo, Colorado Springs, up north into Greeley. Maybe it's out of state, right? We're
right.
looking into Kansas City or St. Louis or Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, take your pick. So what is a 1031 exchange?
So a 1031 exchange is the swap of one investment property for another like-kind investment property. And like-kind is really broad, and we can go over that. But essentially, it needs to be a property that's been held for business and productive use, much like a rental, and then exchanged for another property that will be, used for business purposes and income reporting. And so by doing a 1031 exchange, your client gets to defer the capital gains taxes that would normally be associated with that sale. There is certain criteria that they have to meet to get full deferment. But if they follow all the rules of the 1031 exchange tax code, they should have very limited to no capital gains taxes due at the time.
Okay. Right. So deferred the taxes. So I'm not getting away from paying taxes. Uncle Sam still wants their portion.
Exactly. You're just pushing them forward.
Right. So so what kind of impact does that do? I mean, if I owned a property for the last 10 years as a rental property, what kind of tax ballpark, right? And you're not a CPA. This isn't a tax class, and
right.
Tax is a wide piece, right? A lot of variables to it, but ballpark wise, how much might I pay in tax, right, on that property?
Right. So like you said, there are a lot of variables. It is going to depend on how long you've owned the property, how much it's appreciated, but also if you've ever taken any depreciation on the property. Capital gains taxes, it kind of varies. A lot of times it's normally between 15 and 20%. But again, if they do pay capital gains taxes, any depreciation that they've taken in the past, a portion of that could be recaptured at that time as well.
Yeah. So 15 to 20%, again, depending on how things have gone, that could be a big number.
Exactly. It can be huge, especially if, you're not ready to get out of the real estate game. What's the point in paying Uncle Sam that money that you've worked really hard for, when you can use it to expand your portfolio?
Yeah, right. For wealth, it's way more about how much you keep of your income than what you earn, right? Anybody that's ever been a W-2 employee, here's your salary. That's not the check that goes into your bank account at the end of the day.
Right, exactly.
So by deferring this tax, I can move it into another like kind. So, does it have to be a single family home to a single family home? Does it have to be a commercial property to a commercial property?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So like I said, like kind is super broad. So any property that is considered real property counts. So it doesn't have to be, a single family residence for a single family residence. It could be, single family to commercial space, an apartment building, an office space, even vacant land qualifies. Even though with vacant land, a lot of times it can't be held as like an income producing property, right? Unless it's rented to like a rancher or a farmer. But that is the exception. But it absolutely can be, used on anything that is real property.
Yeah. So if I've got a whole bunch of rental properties that I've accumulated over a lifetime, and they're all near a college campus. I'm tired of college kids and maybe you want to trade that into a storage facility, right? Exactly. That's something that can be done.
Yeah. And we do have a lot of clients that do that actually. So they'll sell, a single family rental and they'll decide that they want to have, kind of multiple streams of income. And so they'll buy, like you said, a storage unit. We do have several clients that do that. And then they're renting out each of those storage spaces and getting an income on it.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the qualifications for a 1031 exchange, right? So, you piqued my interest. I want to sell a property and diversify or, sell high here, buy low somewhere else where I can get a better rental return. What are some of the restrictions or requirements for me to successfully do that 1031 exchange?
Yeah. So with the IRS, there's no real hard set timeline of when you had to have held the property to stay under what's called the safe harbor rules, which is kind of like the big umbrella for 1031 rules. You want to own the property for at least 24 months prior to selling it. Just again, a standard safe harbor and kind of stay on the safe side. Anything less than a year could be seen as inventory or resale. So that does, create a potential red flag.
So I couldn't do this as a fix and flip strategy. I bought it, sold it 3 months later, do a 1031 exchange, defer the taxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So it does need to be a property that has been held for productive use, and again, at least a year to stay safe. And then the property needs to, again, be some type of, income producing property unless it's like vacant land. So second homes and vacation homes do not qualify. And then it does need to be exchanged for something of, similar value and purposes.
Okay. So second home, now we're seeing a lot, right? With short-term rentals for Airbnbs. If I wanted to, which my wife and I have talked about because she has family back in Florida and she won't get my ginger skin to move down to Florida. Colorado native, I'm a snob. I'm going to be here. I don't like alligators and sharks. So, but as far as a second home, right, if it was an Airbnb, is that something that would qualify? We just happen to stay there a week or two out of the year.
Absolutely. So it can definitely be used for short-term rentals like Airbnbs, VRBOs, and you do get an allotted amount of personal usage. So what that looks like is you get 2 weeks each 12-month period, or 10% of the total number of days that you've rented it out at fair market value, whichever is greater. So, if you have a really cool property in Florida that a lot of, Disney nerds like myself would take advantage of, and you guys rent it for like 200 days a year, then you guys can actually use it for 20. But you get no less than 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic opportunity for somebody that wants to get some use out of a property, but still have it producing some income.
Exactly.
Right. Awesome. So what else is going to be required?
So one caveat is whatever title the property being sold is titled in is how the client needs to take title on the new property. So, if it's titled in their individual names, then they want to purchase the new one in their individual names as well. It does get a little bit trickier when it's held in an LLC for a couple of reasons. So some of our clients create the LLC around the address of the property. Mm-hmm. And then so if they go to buy the new property, that's not going to match, right? It's going to look kind of goofy. So sometimes they don't want to do that. However, the vesting matters in the sense of what tax ID number it's reported back to. So if it's like a single member LLC that files as a disregarded entity, we're going to have more flexibility. Because at that point, they can either, purchase it in their individual name or create a new single member LLC with the same tax reporting to purchase it in that name. So that's where it gets a little bit stickier.
Well, and gosh, to reach out to an estate planner, to reach out to Kacey to pre-plan these things so that you can execute it smoothly is going to really set you up in an advantage, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, planning is absolutely key. We like to say a year in this market. Let's be real. That never happens because properties are just coming and going so hot. People would be crazy not to sell their properties. And so maybe they weren't thinking about selling or didn't even know what a 1031 was a year ago. But yeah, planning is definitely going to be key in making sure it's successful.
Yeah. So timeline wise, right? What has to happen? So I made the decision. I'm going to sell my property. I want to do a 1031 exchange. What has to happen timeline wise? Is it Uncle Sam's not going to let me just indefinitely keep this money aside? Right.
Absolutely.
They want me to put it to use.
Yeah. So first things first, always we say, talk to your CPA or tax accountant. The 1031 tax deferral program is amazing, but it's not right for everybody. Again, it kind of comes back to that individual's tax, reporting, and then also their goals. So, if maybe in a year or two, they're not going to want to be in the real estate game, does it make sense for them to reinvest in something of equal or greater value and just put off paying the taxes? So always make sure they speak to their CPA first. But then after that, once they have a signed contract with a buyer, that's when they would want to get in touch with a qualified intermediary. The 1031 does need to be set up before the closing because all net proceeds need to go directly to the QI. Otherwise, it disallows them from taking advantage of the 1031.
The QI being the qualified intermediary. Yep. So again, I can't April 15th go to file taxes and tell the government, hey, by the way, I did a 1031 exchange on this, so I don't owe you taxes.
Exactly.
The money cannot hit my account, correct? I can't touch it. It can't be mine. It has to go to Kacey.
Yeah, you cannot have any constructive receipt of the funds. Even if you sold your house and you got the funds and then tomorrow you went and purchased the new property, if you didn't have that 1031 exchange in place and the funds sent to the intermediary, then even though you reinvested with the, honest intent, at that point, it does disqualify you.
Yeah. So how long, right, do I have to find that new property?
So the timelines are very short and they are hard set deadlines per the IRS rules. So it doesn't vary state by state or, intermediary by intermediary. So from date of closing on the relinquished property, so the property being sold, they have 45 calendar days to identify any potential replacement properties and 180 days from closing to formally close on one or more of the identified properties.
So I have to identify it within 45 days. So 6 weeks
Exactly.
have to be identified, and 180 days to actually buy one of those properties. So
Right.
I don't get to change my mind on day 90, say, hey, one of those ones didn't work out. Let's actually buy this other one that I didn't identify.
Yeah. So unfortunately, even if something happens outside of the client's control, like somebody else buys it, the seller takes it off the market, inspections come back bad, the IRS doesn't allow for extensions or substitutions. So whatever is listed within those 45 days is what we have to work with.
Yeah, very, very little flexibility there with Uncle Sam as it comes to that, huh?
Absolutely. And the identifications do have to be exact. So it has to be, the exact property address or the full legal description. So you can't just, identify like a subdivision or, a building. Otherwise, the IRS will take it that you're buying that entire subdivision or building. So it does need to have, unit number, door number, everything like that. So they know that what you bought is exactly what you identified.
Yeah. Right. And if something happens and I don't get quite identified at 45 days, there's not an extension. There's not a grace period, correct?
Right. Yeah. Unless the IRS issues an extension due to like a natural disaster. There's been one in like Florida before because of hurricanes and everything. And Idaho, I believe, because of fires last year. Unless it's something like that, they do not offer extensions. So once we pass day 45, if you haven't identified, then at that time it's an incomplete exchange.
So day 46, I didn't identify a property. Kacey, are you giving me my money back from the sell of the other home?
We will. So as long as you haven't identified anything, then on day 46 or whatever that next business day is, we will release the funds back to you. We don't do any withholding, so the client would be responsible for that come tax time.
Cool. Right. So again, not taking care of the tax bill or any of that, but
Right.
So at least I do get my money back.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, if you do identify something and we pass day 45, if for some reason you can't purchase what you've listed or you just decide not to, we are required per the IRS to hold the funds for the full 180-day term.
Wow.
Yeah.
So at the end of 45, if you're not 100% sure that you're going to buy one of those properties, maybe it makes sense to just wipe out any property you might have identified on paper.
Exactly.
Right, to get your cash back.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we are, responsible for holding it for the full 180.
Wow. So, if I've done a 1031 exchange to buy the current rental property that I have, am I out of luck? Is this something I can only do once, do 5 times? What does this look like for the frequency? How often can I utilize a 1031 exchange?
So there's no limit on how often or how many times you can do a 1031. Like I said earlier, ideally you want to hold the property for at least 2 years before selling it or rolling it into a new 1031. But you can absolutely, keep doing 1031s as long as you like.
So started buying properties at 18, just every couple of years, do a 1031 exchange and just keep doing it indefinitely, right? I never pay Uncle Sam.
Yep. If you do it until you drop, then, you're not going to be responsible for those capital gains taxes.
So now I've got a young son. Does that mean my son's going to be saddled with over 70 years of accumulating properties and deferring taxes? Who knows what that tax bill might be?
Right.
Is he going to get saddled with that tax? What does that look like for those next in line, right? The next of kin.
Yeah. So it kind of depends again on, how the taxes had been done in the past. Generally, they're not hit with the capital gains taxes, or if they are, it's at a reduced rate. Normally, they just get a step up in basis if they sold that property. Now, if from the time they inherited that property, the most recent one, to the time they sell it, if it's been, a while and it's greatly appreciated, then they could potentially be hit with a portion of capital gains taxes. But again, normally it's not at the same rate as if you yourself were just to sell that property.
So important there to go through the process to get a value at date of death if that's a scenario that you have, right, when it comes to that. So
yeah, and then also just like you said earlier about working with your estate planner, for maybe people that are a little bit older in age, or I mean even for us with young kiddos, we never know what's going to happen. So it's always just a good idea to kind of talk with the estate planner, to get the best advice on how to structure, the property, whether to hold it in a trust, in an LLC in their name, and then what that potentially could look like for their next of kin.
Yeah. Right. And also want to throw this asterisk here. The information that we're covering is current and accurate as of right now, today's date.
Right.
The government, they're changing tax code. We just had a change in government, from Donald Trump now to President Biden. So things change. So if you're watching this video and it's 5 years from now, there may be some changes there.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because with Biden coming into office, he is looking to heavily reform the 1031 tax program. And so, we might see some changes on who's eligible to do one, if there's caps on the amounts or how many times they can do it. So like you said, this is as of, today, February 4th, 2021. So at any time, things could change. I don't see it changing tomorrow. But you do definitely want to make sure that at the time you're planning for this, that you do have the most accurate information.
Yeah, so reach out to Kacey. If you can't get in touch with Kacey, reach out to me. I'll get you connected with Kacey as the time comes, right? We want to make sure that we get you the right information at the time, because again, it's accurate today. Who knows what that looks like? So,
right.
In your experience, who are typically the people doing 1031 exchange? I mean, is this something that the ultra wealthy do and nobody else really gets to do because it doesn't make sense? And if you don't have an answer, right, I'm just kind of throwing you on the spot with that question. But, percentage wise, I mean, I'm guessing it's kind of a full gamut. All sorts of people in different scenarios are utilizing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have, younger people that, like you said earlier, 18 years old, and you want to, kind of get your hands in, investing. And so they might have like a small condo, and then in a couple of years it's appreciated. And so now maybe they want to buy, 2 properties that, equal that one, to kind of diversify things. We have a lot of younger folks doing it. We have a lot of just, blue collar folks doing it, just, average lifestyle that have 1 or 2 rental properties as an extra stream of income. They're doing it, as well as, people that do have a larger financial and real estate portfolio. So it really is widespread on who can do it.
So it really kind of open, not something that you have to be in a certain income bracket to be able to take advantage of.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Very good. So, with the 1031 exchange and folks that are watching, they want to get in touch with you. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you to talk and ask more questions about if it's right for them, how to go about it, how to line up the dominoes so that it's knocked down correctly for them to successfully do a 1031?
Yeah. So like you said, they can certainly reach out to you and you can get us connected. Or they can email me directly at KNEER, so Kneer at ltgc.com. Or they can call me directly at 303-850-4133. Perfect.
So go ahead and say that again, because I'm sure they weren't ready to write it down. But
yeah, it's 303-850-4133. Perfect.
Well, as we wrap this up, Kacey, any final pieces that you'd like to touch on for those that are curious about a 1031 exchange or, just have further questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, they hear 1031 exchange. They might even Google it. If they Google it, their eyes are probably going cross-eyed and their brains are melting because it is a very complex program. But it's really not as complicated as people a lot of times believe. So we'll absolutely do our best to, explain the process and then walk your clients through the process to make it smooth and seamless for them. So, if you have clients that maybe are a little intimidated by it, they're on the fence, they don't know if they want to do it, absolutely have them connect with us at Land Title Exchange. We're always happy to have the conversation with them and just kind of go over everything and, try to make them feel more comfortable and answer any questions.
Yeah, and I know that you've done that for several clients here recently to talk through, is a 1031 exchange right for them?
Right.
And for those folks, it didn't sound like it was the right fit, right? And that's okay. It's good to get the right information to start as opposed to trying to do it after the fact.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people think they won't qualify, but then once we talk about how they've been using the property and then what they plan on doing, they actually do. Or vice versa. They might think that, it'll work, but because of, their goals, or maybe they want to use it more, 6 months out of the year and that 2 weeks just doesn't suffice. Sometimes they don't. And that's totally okay. It certainly doesn't hurt to, connect with us and just go over it. If we don't feel that it's a good idea, we'll absolutely be truthful and, let them know, hey, this probably isn't a good idea. We're not going to, just sugarcoat everything. So we're always here to answer questions.
Well, that's awesome. And Kacey, I know that you teach some classes on this to real estate agents. I took one here just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So for folks that are watching that are in real estate, be on the lookout for Kacey's classes coming up. Do you have a date for your next class and how they might get in touch? I'm assuming they would email you.
Yeah, I don't think I have any coming up in the next couple of months. I'm always open to doing more classes. I know we just did a couple together in January. I think we did 2. So yeah, they can absolutely reach out directly to me or, to you or whoever their realtor or land title sales rep is. They can absolutely reach out to them and we can work on getting something put together and scheduled.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And again, Kacey, thank you so much for donating your time as we talk through the 1031 exchange and answering questions. Again, would love to have you back in the future for more conversations. So awesome. As it's Super Bowl weekend, I'm going to ask you here, who are you pulling for the Super Bowl, or do you care?
Oh, I do care. I love football. It's not the Broncos, so my whole heart's not invested, but I will tell you, I have to go for the Chiefs.
Have to go for the Chiefs. Is it because they're also in the division? There's some loyalty because you love Patrick Mahomes, or you hate Tom Brady? I'm just curious.
All of the above. So I love that they're in the same division, and I love that Mahomes is kind of a newer and upcoming QB. And I also really don't like Tom Brady. I respect him as an excellent football player, but I would love to see the Chiefs take home the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
now that you called me out, who are you going for?
Well, as a Buffalo Bills fan, Tom Brady was in the AFC East in our division for a very long time, kicking the Bills' butt for 20 years. I can't root for him. He has enough Super Bowls. It's time to, let him go.
Spread out those Super Bowl rings a little.
Yeah, we'll have him sitting on his couch for future Super Bowls.
Exactly. Sounds good to me. I'm in agreement.
Awesome, Kacey. Well, again, thank you so much for those tuning in. Appreciate you watching. Let us know what future conversations you want us to have or industry partners you want us to interview, and look forward to doing more of these as they come up. So thanks again, Kacey.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks.